Hello, world. Welcome to another episode of the Deep Dive with Eyal Shai. My guest today is Stephanie Lepp. Hi, Stephanie.
Hi, Ayal.
It's so good to have you here and to have you pronounce my name very precisely.
I
So
feel very
thank you
good
for
about
that.
that. Yeah.
What is an idea that's been helping you live well?
mm, well, I don't know if this is helping me live well. I mean, it's an idea I've been thinking a lot about. I guess it is kind of giving me clarity right now. So I've been thinking a lot about truth. That's one thing I've been thinking about. I've been thinking about a lot of things, but truth is one. And yeah, I look around and I see a lot of struggle with truth. There's some people that are nervous that we're losing it, that we're kind of going to a pre-enlightenment darkness, and it's like must cling to truth at all costs, lest we revert to this dark age. And then I see people who are well. Let's just frame it as kind of the three camps. The three camps I see. So the first camp, we can call that camp naive realism. It's just black and white truth, or truth is on the verge of death, must rescue it, must eliminate all misinformation, black and white, vaccines are 100% safe, and QAnon is 100% false. Okay, and then there's well, I'll just leave it there. There's the naive realist camp. Then there's let's just say the relativist camp, which is there's no such thing as truth anyway. How could we possibly know this whole it's all been, we've been pretending there was black and white, and certainly we can try to know certain things and approximate, but there is no such thing as absolute truth. It's all gray. Vaccines are maybe more safe, but it's not 100%. And it's not black and white, it's gray. And then the last camp would let's say be the nihilist camp, and the nihilists say, um, even if there were such a thing as truth, it wouldn't matter, because what matters is power. What matters is persuasion. So even if there were such a thing as truth, someone by virtue of the power they have can declare an election stolen, and then, drive hundreds of millions of people in that direction. And so what is giving me clarity, the idea that is maybe helping me live my life these days, is that yeah, on their own, I would say each camp is kind of a dead end.
Mhm.
Or, but actually, I'll say but they each hold a partial truth. And maybe the way and so maybe the idea is integration, right? The idea is, well, there is truth. It can be gray, and sometimes we don't need it, right? So just to take things, so vaccines. There are risks, but we could say their public health benefits outweigh their risk. Like, there is truth, and it can be gray. QAnon, you know, it's there. There are maybe a cabal of people who have way too much power over the world, but it's not Satan worshiping reptiles, right? So
Right.
there's some, so we can, there's some truth. It can be gray, and sometimes we don't need it. And I can elaborate on the circumstances in which we don't need truth, because that might be a blasphemous thing to say. But I guess just to kind of close, I think what I would be, the idea that I'm sitting with is something like a new approach to truth, or a new relationship with truth, where we can hold it tight. Thus far, we've been holding it very tightly. We could say once upon a time there was no, and then came the Enlightenment, and then came science, and then came reason, and we've been holding on to it really, really, really tightly. And now with misinformation and deepfakes and blah, 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 blah,
Mm.
we're so scared, and we're gripping onto it even tighter. And what I'm saying is, maybe it's possible to hold it tightly, hold it loosely, and hold it not at all. And that's kind of that's the new integration, is the capacity to have, I could even just say, a more evolved relationship with truth.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, when you say, that the times are changing, literally, and new environments are springing up, an environment of globalism, and I think that's exactly what we have to do, is to evolve, because what has served us so well in the last 200 years might not be good for this day and age anymore. And we could even argue that, the the ways in which we found truth in our mind so well, at least in the West, in this Enlightenment years, maybe we shut out some important truth in order to get to this level of certainty. And I'm definitely looking forward to go more into what truth is at all, because I'm gonna place myself in a fourth camp, and maybe kind of riff on that later. But yeah, I'm really interested to hear from you a little bit about how you even come to deal with this concept so much, and think about, because I think it's relevant, obviously. Past projects you've been involved in, and probably future ones, really have um, part the truth as a central concept in them.
Yeah, well, yeah, the reason I started thinking a lot about truth is yes, because I 2 years ago I launched a project called Deep Reckonings, which is a video series, a series of explicitly marked deep fake videos. It's very clear that they are fake, that imagine morally courageous versions of our public figures. So if Mark Zuckerberg had a crisis of conscience, what would he say? And what would that look like? And it's absolutely explicit that the video is fake, not just because I'm not interested in deceiving anybody, but because that's kind of part of the power of the medium, is that you can know it's fake and it still influences you. It still moves you to see Mark
Mhm.
Zuckerberg say these things. And
Yes.
this is not satire. This is not parody. I'm not trying to throw Mark Zuckerberg under the bus. He does enough of that for himself. There's enough parody and satire out there. I really was trying to kind of imagine if this person had a crisis of conscience. And of course, this is me in my own mind, and I have my biases. But yeah, this is not, I don't know if I would call it, it's like critical fan art. It's like tough love. But the question, the kind of the animating question of the project was, how might we use our synthetic selves to elicit our better angels? And I can say more about the project, but that the project kind of demanded that I come to terms with the ethics of even doing this in the first place. Like, under what circumstances, if any, is it ethical to create a deepfake of someone without their consent? That could take us our entire 2 hours. I have a lot to say about that question, but yeah, I was sitting with the question at least of truth, and putting something that is, even if it's marked, it has this effect on us. We now have a memory. Let's say people who have seen this have a memory in their minds of watching, and does that create a false sense of empathy for him? Like, what if I like him more? Like, I did end up liking Donald Trump and Mark Zuckerberg and Alex Jones and Brett Kavanaugh more after writing these scripts for them and then watching them say these words. So, truth. So, I guess, gosh, there's so much I could say, but I'll just say, I came to, even if we were to eliminate all deepfakes and all misinformation, which is not possible, but even if we were, we would still be in a post-truth crisis. Our post-truth crisis is a crisis of epistemological proportions. Even if we got all the misinformation out of the way, this is a question of how we know what we know. It's also a question of, what is the goal of knowing, right? Why do we even want to know truth in the first place? Is where we can, let's say, begin. What is the purpose of truth? There is such a thing as truth for its own sake, right? Just like scientific research, for like the scientific pursuit for its own sake. But we also want to know truth so that we can do things, right? So we can like solve problems and build houses and cure diseases and do all kinds of things. And so there is the question, under what circumstances do we need what kind of truth, or do we need what kind of relationship with truth? I mean, just to give a very specific example, virtual reality therapy is a completely simulated environment. It is not true. And yet we use these simulated environments, let's say, to heal ourselves of PTSD. If that, let's say one example, we're putting ourselves in a completely fake environment and faking ourselves into thinking it's real in order to heal ourselves of something. Another example, I'll just give a few examples of cases where we might want to kind of relax our relationship with truth. So I think the war with the Ukrainian war, so, Ukrainian propaganda, let's say, the propaganda that Zelensky has been putting out there, I think really beautifully complicates our relationship with truth. Because is he telling the truth? Is he lying? Is he telling a story just to help Ukrainian soldiers feel better about the war so that they stay engaged in it? Maybe, but we're okay with that because of the purpose that it's serving, right? So we're willing to relax our relationship with truth in pursuit of other goals, right? Truth exists in tension with other values. Truth is not the one and only value. Maybe I'll just give one last example, and then I'll. So this is directly from Deep Reckoning. So the way that I did one of the videos is Alex Jones, and for those of you who don't know Alex Jones, he is a master uh, conspiracy theory, but
Convicted at
conspiracy
this
theory.
point.
Yes. So he became well known for spreading the lie that the Sandy Hook shooting was a hoax, and he has spread all kinds of lies on his platform. And he has his reckoning, his deep reckoning, his imaginary reckoning. He has it on the Joe Rogan Experience. He has it in dialogue with Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan is they know each other and are actually somewhat friends. And Joe Rogan has actually tried to elicit a reckoning from him, somewhat successfully. But so this is, the deep reckoning. He actually has it in full on the show. And at the end of the video, Alex Alex Jones he has his whole reckoning, and then he turns to Joe Rogan and he says, "So what do I do with this video?" And Joe Rogan is like, "Well, what do you mean?" And Alex Jones says, "Well, it's fake, but it's true." And Joe Rogan says, "Well, why don't you just pretend that this video is real?" And Alex Jones says, "Well, that's crazy." And Joe Rogan just starts laughing, because how ridiculous is it that Alex Jones thinks it's crazy to pretend that something is fake is real if he has spent so much of his time pretending that things that are fake are okay. So and then Joe Rogan says, "Well, why don't you just come on my show and do the real version?" And so
That's
but it
amazing.
begs the question, like, what if Alex Jones pretending that his deep reckoning, that his fake reckoning was real, is what allowed him to stop broadcasting lies? Like, would we
Right.
be prepared to sacrifice the value that would come from the, transformation of Alex Jones just because it involved a lie? Like, what if Alex Jones just didn't tell us? It was like a placebo effect. It was like, I won't tell you whether it's fake or real. Like, are we more comfortable with that? But I think that to me kind of illustrates, and there are other examples, but illustrates the way that truth exists in tension with other values. It's not the one and only value. So we need to learn how to hold it. I don't know if tightly and loosely is the good way to think about it, but it's a way to think about it.
Yeah, it's so fascinating, and as you gave these um, modern examples, modern as in contemporary, talking about AR or VR or something like that, immediately I was thinking about, like, how far back can we take it and still find things that are images that are being projected for us, and we can choose whether to treat them as real as not. And this actually, one scene that came to mind is like William Wallace in Braveheart, right, or something like that. And um he's giving some speech or any kind of speech by a cinematic um, protagonist to his band of soldiers and trying to rally them for battle. Like, any kind of rhetorician is actually presenting the people in front of him with an image that could actually make them spring into action, have that kind of motivation going after him to battle. And these people would not have been in that state ready to go into battle unless there was some sort of charismatic person conjuring up an image for them to look at momentarily, you know be um completely in that moment with that image rather than any image of the actual hills around them, and then responding to that and changing their state, right? um also
Totally.
also VR, great because it's so immersive. But actually, any book we read just conjures up images for us, and we don't feel like we're confused in any way, but there is a suspension of belief, right, or something like that.
Of
That
disbelief. Yeah.
uh, of
Yeah.
course, um, we suspend our disbelief and we just flow with the thing, and then we find ourselves safely back at our house by the end of it. And I think the whole discussion on truth and all that is really interesting because you live in California, you're pretty much on a fault line, right?
Yeah.
It's
We actually just had
it
an
runs.
earthquake a couple weeks ago. Uh-huh.
Okay, yeah, and this is not even a
Yeah.
rare occurrence. And I had just listened to Jim Jeffries' podcast on earthquakes, so this is fresh in my
Uh-huh.
mind. But in a sense, I view this the spread of misinformation by people who want to achieve their own whatever. And again, this is a good question. Like, could if the people are not nefarious in their intentions, are we actually rooting for them? Good question. But let's say nefarious intentions. People spread misinformation. Should we be trying to shut them down and have all our power kind of thrown on that thing to yeah, clamp down on them and make sure that they do that? Or do we make our houses earthquake proof? You know, which makes sense is like, are you
Yeah.
going to go after the earthquakes and make them stop? At the also, by the way, if we did do that, you know, I think it have adverse effects on the earth in terms of, I don't know, giving letting some of the heat out and so on.
Yeah.
Or are you going to work on proofing your house for this? Or in the case of information, are you going to teach people to think critically so that they have a filter, and then no matter what kind of information you encounter, you're able to do the work for yourself? Because as long as there are gatekeepers, even if they are gatekeepers for the truth, they are still fallible humans. And
Yeah.
I think it should be obvious that the onus should be on each person individually to be able to sift through information and arrive at truth.
Yeah, well, I would definitely say a little bit of all of the above. It's not either or, but I think right now we're overly focused, let's say on the right on the like deep fake detector, like eliminating misinformation, and not enough
Yeah,
focused on
that's
proofing our
gatekeeping,
house.
right?
And so, yeah,
Yeah,
so I
yeah.
would say along with deep fake detectors and like convicting Alex Jones and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Along with all of that, I am calling for, I mean, straight up for an evolution in our epistemology. I'm calling for the next enlightenment, a new relationship with truth. And actually the new relationship, I mean, you just, I can't remember what you just said right before that kind of brought this to mind, but the current relationship with truth assumes, oh, it was when you were saying from Braveheart, like when someone
Hmm.
speaks to their people and rallies them, and then there's a little bit of self-fulfilling prophesizing there, right? It's I am,
Hmm.
and the current vision of truth kind of makes this assumption that we are distinct from reality somehow. We are
Hmm.
actively co-creating reality with the way that we think and the way that we speak. Some of us, of course, have more power to do this than others, like Donald Trump, like people who have power or have broadcast capacity. But there's something here about kind of absolving ourselves of that illusion that we are somehow distinct, like entirely distinct, and having a relationship with truth that takes responsibility for our co-creation of it, right? For our co-creation of reality. And so then the onus is, it's not just are you speaking the truth, but like, are you being a responsible steward of what happens in the world? You know, and
Hmm.
like part of that, I mean, truth is an essential, I don't know, like let's just say triad: truth, goodness, beauty. Is the way that you're relating to truth in service also, or in relationship also, or in balance with goodness and beauty or something. But like, truth is a part of this equation, obviously, but there's also, like you said, like we are doing a co-creative act with our words, with our speech. So let's be responsible stewards of that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
it's so interesting to think about these things, and I love that you bring up beauty and good, because these are concepts that I've thought a lot about in my capacity as a dialectician and somebody who's working with people on creating good concepts, true concepts. And I say true concepts, and it sounds weird because actually relativism is is the default basically in our country when it comes to agreeing on different concepts in conversation, because of course people don't actually talk about the same thing when they say things like justice and love and so on, right? They often have different conceptions of it, but they just kind of would like to assume that the other person has the same thing. If you try and ask questions, kind of like what Socrates did with people in ancient Athens, you find that relativism is like a very safe go-to kind of ism, because then it kind of says, well, hey, it's we're all okay. Okay, my definition is as good as your definition, and it takes a lot of gentle kind of picking the things around it so that you don't trigger the other person into completely just disappearing from the discussion. Um, and when I tell people that I'm going to help them think about true concepts, that's kind of weird. People are like, no, what a beauty is to me could be a totally different thing than it is to you. And I'm like, well, the instances of beauty, what you find beautiful, the instances are going to be very different because they're based on expectation, on culture, or something. But actually, you can think of three beautiful things in your mind that you find beautiful. Think about what makes them beautiful, and let's find out if it's not exactly beauty is to you, is actually what beauty is to me. Sure, the
Mm,
instances are different, but more than likely, we're going to find that actually beauty is the same for us.
mm,
And with truth, that's really interesting, because I think for a lot of people there is a confusion between truth and reality.
mm,
In colloquial terms, we think that whatever is true is really out there, whereas
mm,
for me, I think truth is a relationship between the concepts that we have and we apply them, and actually what is out there that can't be accessed unmediated
mm,
by the senses or perception. Um, and that puts truth in a very interesting place, because truth is not what is out there. It's our current best explanation of what is out there. And if the explanation is pretty good, it's going to do a lot of good for us. So, see Newton's
mm,
theory,
mm-hmm.
for example. Is it true? I don't know. Do
Yeah.
you view it as true? 'Cause-
Yeah, I'm kind of the consummate pragmatist here. So, is it helpful?
hmm,
Is what I would ask.
right. I think it's fitting with reality on Earth, and therefore it has a high value of truth. If you go on to
Mm,
the galactic scale and now you want to launch satellites and so on, you probably want to look at general relativity, and that's truer in a sense. But truth is fittingness, um,
yeah,
between a conception and what is out there, but there's context, right? And the context matters, I think.
yeah. No, and I should say, is it true and is it helpful are two separate questions. So, and yes, I agree that yes, it can be true and unhelpful, and it can be true and or more true and unhelpful. It can be more true and
We're just
unhelpful.
assuming that we're good meaning people, right? Aiming at living well.
Yeah.
But of course, for a lot of the people who manage to have the kind of power that they have through, um, I don't know, getting a lot of support from people. To them, they are showing an aspect of reality that they know a lot of these people will see as true and be part of them, and they have nefarious intent. So, um, yeah, but the picture they're painting seems very true to whoever is looking at it. That's for sure.
Hmm. So, what is your fourth camp?
So I think that's part of it. I mean, looking at truth not as reality, and this confusion is has been around for a long, long time. I like to use the example of the Christian apocalypse. So in Greek, apocalypsis means an unveiling or taking something out of its hiding place, and it just, I think, shows a tendency of humans to want to see things what they are. A big thing in the New Testament is the theme of blindness, where people don't recognize Jesus or don't recognize the truth. They literally don't see, or they're blind to it. And I think that there is a kind of feeling that we want to know, and then people say the truth, but I say that's reality. And that is a naive and completely unrealistic wish to see the
Mm,
behind the scenes, right? Because we are
mm,
confined to our mind, which basically creates a controlled hallucination, according to Anil Seth. Um, and this is what we have to remember. Truth as relationship, I think, is a novel approach that most people don't really entertain. What do you
mm.
think?
I mean, I'm kind of yeah, I guess like the new camp, let's say, that I would kind of advocate for is the meta camp, right? The camp that draws from all the camps. And so I would say, like, yet another camp, like your camp, truth is a relationship, would be something to draw from. If I go back to the question, under what circumstances is which way of relating to truth, or which camp on truth, helpful? Like, we can have it all. Like, we don't even need to decide. Sometimes we can think of truth as black and white. Sometimes we can think it doesn't exist. Sometimes we can think we don't need it. Sometimes we can think of it as a relationship. That's kind of where I guess I arrive in my very non-dual. Like, I don't need to make like a decision. And we can like kind of welcome all the camps, and use them when they're I guess then I am kind of the consummate pragmatist. Use them when they're helpful. But if I were to kind of, um, let's say, try to just respond more directly. I mean, I think it sounds like your camp is similar to, correct me if I'm wrong, kind of where Richard Rorty was coming from with his more pragmatic
I'm not sure. I'm not sure,
philosophies
honestly.
on truth. Yeah, he was a brilliant pragmatic philosopher based at Stanford, but because well, I don't need to go into the kind of drama. Well, I guess, sure. Because he was, like, analytic philosophy is kind of what reigns the day in
Hmm.
U.S. academia. He was stuck into the comparative literature department. But I think that's kind of was like, truth is not something that can be kind of like 100% ascertained. There's a fittingness quality, and I think, and I'm not a Richard Rorty expert, so I shouldn't, but it was something like, truth should be in service of, and like philosophy should be in service of, and for him, philosophy should be in service of democracy. So yeah, there's also a pragmatic orientation there of what version of truth, or what vision of truth, or what theory of truth can support an open society, an open democratic society.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. The question is, for me, is like, what happens if we go past the ends, and thinking about the ends, and ends that we generally think are good, but actually we can't agree with every people on what end is good, and therefore there's going to be strife over that. What about finding the truth about concepts in a way that makes them makes our whole understanding of the world something that is robust and not full of contradictions. Or so, what is the relationship between, um, let's say, love and living well? We want to find a true definition for love, and we need to do it in the context of living well, so that we know if there's the fittingness that is truth there. And it goes, I think, a little bit beyond the actions that people take, and what actions they take over there. Um, yeah, so I don't know. I didn't mean to go on this to go on this tangent for too
No.
long. Yeah, but I'm interested if you're thinking about the synthesis of the three camps. Like, how do you view this manifesting itself in the world?
Yeah, good question. Is this just me playing around in my head? So I think who this is especially helpful for, I think who this is for more than anything is people whose profession, people, truth tellers, let's say, people whose professions or livelihoods are very wrapped up in. So we could say scientists, we could say journalists. I think it's really more for journalists than anyone else. I see journalists as the people who are most kind of um, in a way that is to the detriment of journalism, and like clinging to naive realism because they're scared that there's nowhere else to go, because they see the only other options are relativism, which, like, if there's no truth at all, why even try, and nihilism. If all that matters is power, then again, what, like, let's just be activists, let's just be advocate. um So I see journalists as kind of those who can, or COVID is actually a great example where we, like, public health experts and our authorities kind of clung to this outdated black and white, right? Like, vaccines are safe, no masks. Oh wait, yes, masks. Communicating in certain terms in a way that was backfired, really, because when people can smell that it's not so black and white, people can smell the gray, and our authorities are not offering us anything gray, then naturally people run to conspiracy theory or run to somewhere else who's offering
Well, they sense
another part of the
dishonesty.
story.
They sense
Yeah, they
dishonesty,
sense
which
dishonesty.
was there. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, this is very much in the case of science. And I mean, with science, I can go much deep, but so, again, if instead of, and not that anyone communicated as vaccines are 100% safe, but it's obviously different to say vaccines have legitimate risks. Let's talk about those risks and their public health benefits. We have decided with these group of people, or here's what we think that their public health benefits outweigh their risks for these populations. It's a much more gray but much more honest way of communicating. And I think, to the extent that we cling to naive realism, or we cling to black and white truth, we being, let's say, scientists, journalists, or expert authorities, people who have historically delivered us the truth, I think that we do that to our detriment. We do that to our peril. And so I think this kind of new way of relating to integral way, integrated, metacamp, pragmatic synthesis on truth would be particularly helpful for, yeah, our experts, our truth tellers, our professional truth tellers.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you could see that there is such a demonization of people who notice that the gatekeepers are not doing their job very well, even though that part was true. Um, and then, of course, the alternatives, which is just like every crazy thing that you see on Facebook or something, that isn't great. But like you say, there is a something that's true in every camp, and I think that the camp that turned to conspiracy theories or something, that was in a way, a natural response to sensing dishonesty from the people who are supposed to be 100% reliable and honest. I think again it's also very interesting to see how the discussion around the truth and the need to get to this like 100% certain um, thinking mode, which is just not how nature works. We live in a world that's in constant flux where things are changing,
Mm,
and the certainty, the more you're going to strive for certainty in your life, the more you're going to suffer, because what can you do? It is like kind of going and fighting off the windmills, right? Like Don Quixote or something like that. um,
mm-hmm.
and I think it happened with COVID too, because in the midst of all this storm about vaccines, yes, no, yes, no, I think a lot of people just got so caught up in it that they couldn't even see outside of this thing, and they think that was the whole world is vaccines, yes or no, and how safe is it. Where the point in life, I think, more than it is about staying alive, is great, but if you're staying alive for too long and you don't live well, like that is a problem, and you could really ruin your here and now and your life and make it a life not worth living if you cling on so much to this rule of like I have to keep living. And I'm not saying this to make a stand or take a stand, but at some point I think on Joe Rogan there was Robert Malone, this very
Uh-huh.
infamous and that was a very interesting moment because I listened to that episode. There were
Yeah.
maybe two or three instances of him I was like, okay, that is a bit weird or something, but overall it was not controversial. And when he said there's a mass psychosis, should you liken it to World War II or Nazis? No, that's stupid, that's stupid, don't do that, it's like irrelevant. But was there a mass psychosis in the sense that we've all gone to like deal with this one aspect of our life and we made it the whole of our lives? Absolutely, I think we
Mm,
got hijacked by this discussion over the
mm.
truth when there is no truth in that sense, and we should have been able to zoom out and see things from a larger perspective. Um,
Mm.
yeah, so I don't know where this is leading me, but I'm curious to hear from you what it makes you think of.
Yeah, I mean, how would one have communicated about the vaccine if one were coming from, this pragmatic synthesis on truth? I mean, I just, I think,
Mm,
I think it would have been, yeah, I just think it would have been more gray, more honest, more uncertain, more, I mean, and just more truthful. I mean, in that respect, more truthful, more fitting, let's say, to reality. But I think that the other thing that this kind of way of relating to truth can do is we don't have to be scared of people like Robert Malone, right? We don't have to be scared of anyone who's bringing this like tiny little kernel of something that may be like partially true that we can integrate into the our understanding of whatever phenomenon we're talking about, like Alex Jones has talked about. I forget what it is. Something. Turn like the water turning the frogs gay, or I can't remember what the claim is. It's
oh,
some claim that on the face of it sounds absurd, and like I can't. And I forgive me. I shouldn't even be bringing this up because I don't know how to cite it appropriately, but. There is somehow some little partial truth there, and I can't remember what it was. But the bigger point is like we don't have to be so scared when we're operating from this pragmatic synthesis meta camp. I should come up with a better name for this place. No partial truth is scary anymore.
right.
Someone saying this is the whole truth and all the truth and nothing but the truth, well, whatever. You don't agree with you, but I'll take the little kernel you have in there and I'll integrate it into this 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 synthetic synthesis on truth that I'm building. I don't have to be scared. I don't even have to be scared of, you know, um, in physics, it's like, does anything even exist at all, or is this all just strings? Like, are we even real? It's like I don't have to be scared of any of that. It's like maybe we're not real. Maybe none of this is real. Whatever you physicists find is all right with me, because I'm still over here trying to like help govern like shepherd an open society through a pandemic. And either your partial truth or whatever is gonna like help me, or maybe it's not that relevant. And the fact that we're all made of strings is not scary to me anymore, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, I think so, and I think that there was a really interesting dynamic specifically with the pandemic, because in the first couple of months, you honestly don't know if this pandemic is going to kill half of us, within half a year. You don't know which way it's going to mutate. You don't know, and if you're faced with an accelerating semi truck, accelerating at you, you should make a quick decision and be, certain. Go figure. Whatever you find certain, you should act on it, and it doesn't matter if it's right or left at that moment. You know that staying in one place, um, you're going to be doomed. So it created this whole thing of like, we must act right now, and this kind of makes the whole decision making process a very binary one. It's like yes or no. Come on, we have to go for it, right? At some point, I don't think this was fitting. Like, as soon as we understand that this is a relatively mild pandemic, which is a view held by, I think every immunologist I heard. I forget the guy who went on Sam Harris's podcast, maybe Eric Topol or somebody else.
Mm.
Um, and they say this is a relatively mild one. It's like, okay, we should have gone back to now breathing in and looking at it again, and recognizing that there isn't an accelerating semi truck coming at us, and becoming comfortable with the fact that there is no certainty. And I think this also relates to like living well on a personal level for all of us. If 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 we as people live with the sense that um I have to get this right, or I have to get to that specific situation that's on my mind, and if I don't make it, I'm going to be in terrible shape, and kind of focus on that, and really wanting to be certain, you're going to live a very unwell life, because um, life is a dance, and you're faced with new obstacles every moment, and you have to kind of
Mm-hmm.
navigate around that, and you have to be comfortable with uncertainty. Um, is that something that you've seen people starting to do? I think it's this comfortability, um, comfort with uncertainty that's really needed at this time.
I totally agree. I mean, I've seen a lot of calls for it, comfortable with uncertainty, and I think that's definitely part of what that's definitely part of this. What's let's say being called for here is just getting comfortable with uncertainty. Yeah. Um, I think yeah, and I can say more about, I think part of it is getting comfortable with uncertainty and comfortable with grayness, comfortable with not knowing. We don't know everything about the vaccine. Where the knowledge is unfolding, it's perpetually unfolding. The science is never settled.
Right.
The science is settled is considered a thought terminating cliche. It's a way of like the science is by definition unsettled. We
Mm-hmm.
arrive at new places of settledness that allow us to do things we were not able to do. That's how we know that there's a fit, right, between truth and reality, is that we're able to do things and accomplish things successfully. But part of it is, yeah, part of it is getting comfortable with uncertainty and grayness and not knowing. I think part of it is letting more people be knowledge creators. And this is there, so I mean, just to give a very, very specific example, um, sure, I'll just give a very specific. So geophagy is the geophagy. Do you know what geophagy is?
I understand the Greek. It means eating earth, but
Oh,
what does it
wow,
mean?
that's amazing that you speak Greek. That's exactly what it is. That's exactly what it is. It is the Native American practice of consuming soil. So
There you
Native
go.
Americans had this practice of eating soil, but well, what they did was they would, and this is in this part of the, maybe throughout the United States, but there's a lot of oak trees here, so there's acorn trees, and they would make acorn meal, and acorns have have some have tannins in them, and
Hmm.
they would mix soil into the acorn meal in order to detoxify the tannins. And
Wow.
then, well, so when I was in grad school, I was in a soil science class and I did my soil science paper on geophagy. But when I looked at the scientific literature on geophagy, what I found was scientific literature was like, wow, we can you believe that we figured out that what Native Americans were doing made sense. What they were doing
Right.
was detoxifying the it's like, did we figure out that what we didn't figure, I mean, they already knew that it made sense. They've been doing it for hundreds of thousands of years. All we figured out was that we could understand it. That's all we figured out was that we are able to understand
Right.
what they already knew. So yeah, I would say get comfortable with uncertainty, let more people create more knowledge, especially when the stakes are high, especially when uncertainty is high and stakes are high. You need more people participating in the production of knowledge in order for people to trust the result that comes out the other end. I mean, I'm speaking of post normal science right now. I can say more about that. But so I would say comfortable with uncertainty, let more people make more knowledge, embrace different ways of knowing. Maybe that's kind of going back to the indigenous or Eastern medicine or just other ways of knowing. And, and then yeah, release your grip on truth entirely. Sometimes make room for purposeful fiction when what would be more helpful is not a truth. We can make room for that. That's what I would say. The diagnosis.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I really love it. I think that our unhealthy relationship with truth comes from, years and years of having our formal education system, and really not just the education system, but the education culture, putting such strong emphasis on giving children from a very young age the correct kind of knowledge that they're going to use, and this really stymies critical thinking, of course, because you're just handing people down dogmas, and you're chastising them if they don't actually follow after you when the test is given to them. And I think, like, to give a practical example from my life, with my daughter, who is 4 years old, so that's still young. But I think it's good to ask people questions, especially children, because they're not so afraid of getting things wrong as
Yeah.
adults who have already gone through the education system are. But ask them what they think is going to happen if they do X, and let them be wrong, because unless it's going to be a lethal mistake of some sort, or a
Yeah.
traumatizing mistake or something, you want to be making mistakes so that you understand that next time you're going to have intellectual humility, and you're not going to invest so much of your identity in knowing things. And this is why it's so painful also for people that I talk with sometimes, if I do dialectic, and it's all about asking questions like, what is love? What is justice? What is the good? What is beauty? People are so afraid that, because I think that we think that when we're 20 something, we should just magically understand these concepts because everybody's acting like they do. Of course, they don't, but that's the facade we're
Mm.
putting up. And so people are
Mm-hmm.
really unwilling to examine themselves because what does it say about me? Um, um, what everybody knows what it is, and I don't. No, no, everybody doesn't know. Relax, but they're just not admitting it, right? Um,
Mm-hmm.
so I think that's a practical thing to take away from the discussion on truth is like you want to be able to let people have their untruthful beliefs tested out so they can see for
Mm.
themselves, right?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I have a 5.5-year-old, so I'm with you on yeah, letting them learn from experience
And
when
also
it's
like
safe.
it, and it can be a playful thing because if you meet a flat earther and it's like that's great, it's like I challenge you to build a GPS system that works. Show
Exactly.
me,
Where the
right?
rubber
It's
meets the
like
road.
listen.
Thank you.
Yeah.
But that's also why I don't, like you said, like we're spoon feeding dogmas. Like I guess I just like under some circumstances that might actually still be useful. Under like some like in the military. I don't know. It's like sometimes when the stakes are super high and it's like
Yep.
you are going to learn this thing and I'm going to shove it into your brain. But is that a way to cultivate a love of learning? No, that's a way to just shove something into someone's brain. But in a way, I mean, the way I feel about it too is just like, thank God we've given birth to so many ways of teaching or so many ways of understanding truth or so many ways of everything, and we can use different ones when they're useful. We don't need to call them wrong, or there's some that kind of suck. We don't want to use them that often. They're not fun, they're not fair, they're not beautiful, they're not just. But there's, maybe they're useful in emergency circumstances. But yeah, I mean, build a GPS system. It's like then believing in flat Earth can just be an idea that somebody likes. It's like a work of art. It's like you get to just like it, but you're not going to use it. You can
Right.
just think about it and enjoy it, but the one that you're going to use to build a GPS system is a very different, maybe that's a weird example. Like, how could you possibly hold both? But a way in which I think you can hold, but like you can both believe gender is real and believe it's not real. You can believe it's real when you want to, I mean, or race. We can decide that race is real if we want to do reparations or affirmative action or something. It's like, yeah, I'm going to pretend race is real so that we can do right this historical wrong and blah blah blah, and then I can just let go of race altogether when I want to just feel into my shared humanity with all humans irrespective of skin color. So we don't even need to make like totally a decision. In a way, it's like we can kind of just use them all, hold them, and some of them will obviously be more useful, more good, more beautiful, more true than others. But for other ones, like if you want to believe the earth is flat, sometimes it's fine, just don't bring it into the design room when we're designing the GPS system.
Yeah, or bring it. No, I want people. I want to see it. I want to see the
bring it, test
GPS
it.
system. Yeah, no, I
Who
want to see
knows?
people earnestly working to make it work. This is what I want
Yeah, yeah,
because
yeah, yeah, yeah,
it's like
yeah,
playful, and there's really no reason um to have your blood boil when you hear something like that because you could think
yeah,
about such retorts or rebuttals to anything of the sort. So
yeah.
I
No,
think
you're
that's
right.
what we should focus on.
It's so funny. I mean, just on that, it's like it's funny to me that our debates about these kinds of things are so abstract. It's like as if, I mean, not as if, but in this case, it's not as if one of them is true. I do actually believe the Earth is round, and it's not just my. I mean, So, but for some things, it's like we have these abstract debates, and yeah, there's something to this of like, let's actually try using these ideas and see what they're useful for. And sorry, flat Earth, your idea is just not, just didn't end up being useful for that many things, if
Yeah.
anything at all. Maybe
Yeah.
it's useful for, yeah, I don't know what it's useful
um
for.
no, well, I think it's useful for showing everybody that you're very staunch contrarian, and you're going
Yeah,
you're
yeah.
going to
It's a
yeah.
badge. It's a badge of staunch contrarianism.
Yeah.
There it is. Yeah,
But yeah, I absolutely agree about race is something to see that, because it is just like Newtonian physics versus general relativity. It's like the scope really changes what you want to use, because it
exactly.
there is fittingness, and we can't. I think this kind of touches on a thought that I had, of how to actually include more and more people and see them as our allies. Because people who, if I can figure out that your conception of living well, the things you want in life, and actually people, it doesn't matter if it's flat earthers, anti-vaxxers, it doesn't matter who it is, there is always a lot more shared humanity than differences about the details about something. Like, we all want our kids to do well, whatever that is, we all want to do well, and so on. And if you manage to find that shared humanity, you can view the other person as an ally. It doesn't mean that you have to think like them or agree with them on how to reach where we all want to reach. But for the very abstract things of what kind of life we want to live, I think that is generally very much the same for everyone. And yeah, absolutely. And because we've lived in a world where in the 19th century there was still, I mean, even the 20th century, to be honest, there was such a strong emphasis on skin color. You're right. I always found it quite weird, both that there are people who want to keep it that way, but now put whoever was at the bottom before now at the top, and still keep the racism very much alive. And there are the people who's like, I already live as if it doesn't exist anymore, never existed. I'm just living my. And both are kind of, as you say, not really integrating the two views. Whereas
Hmm.
keeping both things at the same time in mind, I think that's a brilliant idea, because it really helps kind of shift perspectives, which in its own right is an amazing skill to have.
I agree. Amen. Yeah, speaking my language. Yeah.
Have you seen anything done concretely, any methods for trying to educate people maybe differently about this whole field of truth, how it's perceived in media, or anything like that?
No, 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 no. I mean, no, and I don't see this out there. This is why, and I'm not really sure what to do with it. It like on the one hand, it feels new and helpful, and on the other hand, it feels so obvious that maybe it's not really new or helpful. I can't quite tell, but I don't know. Is this something that is worth putting on a megaphone about and saying, "Hey, world," is that like, should I write a paper? I mean, not that I could get, I mean, not, but I mean, actually, yeah, I give talks, I give public talks not infrequently, and I do wonder, like, is there something here that I should kind of try to really kind of name and frame and offer as a the I need to give it a good name, but I mean, well, do you think it would be helpful?
Well, seeing how much suffering we're experiencing because of our misunderstanding of the concept of truth and our current, I think there's definitely um, moral upside to dealing with that, and
Uh-huh.
finding a way to do it. I don't think it's very easy, and it could cost you a lot personally if you went and invested a lot of time in it. But I'm thinking there's more to talk about in that field for
Oh
sure,
yeah. Well,
because
here's one question. I mean, kind of tangential, but since you brought up Newtonian physics and the theory of relativity, I mean, something that has always confused me is, and tell me if I'm wrong, I don't know enough about physics, but my sense is there has been this kind of search for the theory of everything, right? For the theory
Hmm.
that, but why not? Why does it not make sense to us that different theories apply at different scales of reality, at different levels of organization? Does that, to me, that's like, that's the theory of everything, is the meta theory, is once you've discovered which laws apply in which circumstances across all circumstances, that's it. You got it. You have, right? Like, is that, or no? Tell me.
I mean, I'm not a physicist, first of all, but no, I think you're pointing out to something true. I think that the search is there because we understand that some calculations don't add up, so we know there's something
But
out
what
there
does
still
add
to
up
be
mean?
discovered.
Is it, does it mean like at the edges we don't know how to make sense? Like, where does Newtonian physics end and theory of relativity begin?
Oh,
Is it
so
like, is that
that
what we're,
was yeah, basically, I mean that's
or
exactly what
what,
happened.
you
They
know,
used
what, let's just say water, like the properties of water obviously change if you're looking like this or if you're looking like,
hmm
so is it that, and is it, we don't understand what's going on at the gray zone between them, or because to me, I don't know, to me it seems to make a lot of sense that there would be little different laws at different scales.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm not qualified to answer. I know that what happened with
Yeah,
Newtonian physics is that they applied them to other celestial bodies, and then they found, oh, we actually can't predict where Mercury is
right.
going to be, so we need a different thing. And I think that's the type of thing that we have with physics today. So the search continues, and the search will
Uh-huh.
continue forever because
Right,
all
because
we
reality is infinite. Yeah. Yeah.
reality is we keep
Infinitely small and infinitely huge. So,
and
yeah.
we keep adding nuance to our understanding, and you could always keep getting
But
more
okay, but
nuance,
actually
even
this
if
leads to
space is
the,
finite.
yes, okay. Well, this maybe segues. I know we don't have very much time, but this maybe kind of
No, we're good.
segues to the other idea that we were going to talk, because at a certain point, I have a totally uninformed hypothesis that at a certain point you start to see a pattern. It's not like we're just going deeper and deeper and deeper and everything is new every time. Like, we start to see some kind of a pattern, and so then we can kind of predict, I would imagine, what laws would apply. And I'll just like, I can keep going with this, or maybe I'll just let you respond to that and then kind of
No, yeah,
say more
just
about.
as you said, I was so much into the focus of truth, but I know that we discussed maybe talking about the factual of nature of things, and I think that the word factual just came to my mind the minute you were like, this
Yeah.
is about, because yeah, I think fractals are fascinating. I think this is exactly what it is, because a fractal is basically a self similar pattern where things change, but they don't change so much that it looks chaotic to you, but they're not so static that you see that the thing isn't changing, right? And I think that's exactly
Hmm.
what happens with knowledge and with different scales and with emergent properties, which I think is an important term here, because that's exactly what you say about water. Is like, if you look at individual molecules, it doesn't really make much sense, and you can't actually predict the way they behave if you look at them. But then you zoom out, you see water, and this distinct um, perceptible kind of one thing object that you can know the physics of. And yeah, I think that is exactly that. That's what we're looking for in physics and in everywhere, are patterns, and that's how our mind works, right? Concepts are abstractions of patterns. So if it's the concept of a chair, it's basically we see a chair a lot, and we just get an abstraction of that in our mind. Now, for most people, it's based on how a chair, on what a chair looks like. Uh, but to make it more consistent, when we realize that the chair, the abstract chair, is not yellow, is not made of wood, could also be made of metal, all these things. Then, if we do away with accidental properties, we remain with an abstraction of a pattern, and then a chair is a piece of furniture made to for sitting on or something like that, right? So basically, our mind is, I think, patterns upon patterns upon patterns, kind of interacting with one another. And the world is fractal in nature because from moment to moment it changes all the time, but not in a way that's unrecognizable to us.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, and I think the implications of this are pretty profound because, we say like we say everything is connected. We say everything is connected, but what are the epistemological implications of that? If everything is connected, then we can know just by knowing like some element of it, we can kind of know the whole. In some way, we can know all of it by knowing by seeing the pattern. We can know, like if our hands are a map of the cosmos, we can know the cosmos by looking at our hands. And maybe it's helpful to give a couple examples and then
Hmm.
say why this is even worth thinking about. So there's this old, just to give two examples, there's an old book about herbs called The Doctrine of Signatures. And it has these like, little, like if a plant, if it's yellow and it grows by water, it's probably a diuretic. Diuretic is
Hmm.
something that helps us pee.
Hmm.
So it's like, yeah, if it's yellow and it grows by water, like we co-evolved with plants. Of course, they're going to communicate to us in a language that we can understand. If it's yellow and it grows by water, it probably is a diuretic, right? We don't need to know. We have co-evolved with reality in a way that we can read it.
Mm.
And that's not so much a fractal, but another example is the three sisters. So throughout the history of Mesoamerica, corn, beans, and squash have been grown together because the the corn is a pole for the beans to climb up, and then the beans fix nitrogen for all of them, and then the squash shades all of their roots. And so they were, and then scientist comes along and it's like, wow, like, can you believe that corn, beans, and squash have complementary nutrients? It's like that's not a coincidence. It's because they grow well together in the earth that they have that they then take up nutrients that are complementary and therefore complementary to us in our bodies, and therefore create kind of a balanced diet. Like it all goes hand in hand. It all goes hand in hand. And so there's just there is a way in which, to me, we don't need to know so much if we're paying attention to the patterns in a way, or we're paying attention to the fractal nature of reality. And right now, it's like the world is in crisis. There's so much we think we need to figure out. There's so much we need to measure and we need to figure out, and ice cores, and how much is the climate changing, and how so much. And it just, I I'm definitely not anti-knowing or anti-science or but I just believe that it is possible to know whether something, it's not like know everything. It's a kind of knowing. It's to know whether something is like a solution. Like the fact that the three sisters grow together so well together is kind of like all we need to know about them in order to
Hmm.
know that then eating them would be a nutritious, it um I think there, no, I guess there is a way of knowing, or how to just kind of put a pin in it. um Being in loving relationship with what we are trying to know is part of, we can know like this, or
Hmm.
I think being, yeah, there's something about being in loving relationship with what we are trying to know that will give us the information we need in a faster, more efficient, and like loving way, where we are actually helping and protecting the thing we are trying to know, because we are now in dialogue and relationship with it, rather than trying to like figure it out like
Yeah,
in
yeah. I
a
think
Cartesian sense.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to this triad you mentioned of beauty, goodness, and truth, because I see that with the concepts in our mind. There is absolutely nothing more beautiful than thinking about a concept relating it to other concepts, going with axioms, testing them out to see, okay, if this, then that, doing the logical work and ending up with something where there are no contradictions in it. Do you get a stamp from God that says, congratulations, this is the right answer? No, not in dialectic, not in science. Impossible, actually, to positively say this theory is true, right? Every theory is going to be superseded by a better theory. But there is, and this is something that was acknowledged by many philosophers of science, but um, and the one I'm thinking immediately about is David Deutsch, who's a physicist and a philosopher, and I recommend reading his books. But there's just this immutable connection between truth and elegance and beauty,
Yeah,
and true things
totally.
tend to be
Oh, you
elegant
froze.
and beautiful. But the
Or
interesting
maybe I
part
froze.
is that
I guess it depends what perspective we have.
perspective, because they can be very beautiful. Like for the racist who thinks about like the superiority of his own race, that's a beautiful theory too, and we have to acknowledge that. He's probably never related it to something that's high level, like living well. Therefore, he cannot see that he's actually doing himself a disservice by hating
Mm.
others. Um, but this is exactly it. So once we find something beautiful, I think we should again do as fractals do and kind of take it up to another level and see what emerges and how it relates to something outside of it. But it's really beautiful if we see something and then see what emerges out of it, because there is also it's very energetically efficient to be able to compress knowledge or information into smaller bits that you could unpack, and now they're simple again. And when things are simple, they're not so beautiful. Looking at a simple thing, like literally just like one thing without many relations, is unlikely to be perceived as beautiful. But you have the ability to unpack it to see it beautiful. Or if you'd like a metaphor, put it under a microscope. Now see the beauty that it's really made of on the microscopic scale.
Yeah, I no, I think beauty is a great indicator, right? Beauty is meaningful to us. It's telling the fact that we find something beautiful is telling us something about it, right? Like, I guess like an example that comes to mind is there is this story of that this so foie gras. Do you know how
Hmm.
foie gras was invented? Actually, I didn't know this. So
No.
foie gras was invented in the time of the pharaoh. So foie gras,
Okay.
this is what. So foie gras is actually is like a naturally occurring phenomenon. Every fall, geese gorge themselves with dry leaves in order to prepare for the winter,
Hmm.
and that's what makes their liver soft and taste good. Is after they've gorged themselves with dry leaves, or and it was the pharaoh who I this is this is a, I heard this in a TED talk. Don't believe everything you hear on the internet, but this is a story from Dan Farber. It's a great TED talk. Dan Farber, he's a chef, and he tells the story about how, yeah, it was the pharaoh who said to his slaves, he said, "This is so good. Figure out a way to get this to me all year round." So, which means that slaves had to force feed geese, which is something that nobody would want to do, right? It's only within the context of slavery that you can force someone to do this to a goose, because the
Hmm.
pharaoh wants to eat this food all year round instead of just when it's naturally occurring in the fall. Okay, so then, centuries later, I guess France has like an Olympics for food, and I don't know what it's called. There's some competition, and there's a farmer who he only produces foie gras seasonally. He doesn't force feed his geese. He just lets them eat whatever they want, which means he only has foie gras in the fall, right? Or in the winter when they've already, and so he enters his naturally occurring foie gras into this competition. This competition is purely how good it tastes. It has nothing to do with how well you treated your geese, okay? And he wins like every time, which to me is like we can even taste like beauty is meaningful. What tastes good
Mm-hmm.
is meaningful. We can even
Mm-hmm.
taste it on our taste buds. We didn't need to know, that this farmer treated his geese better. It even tastes better, right?
Hmm.
And like we don't take the story so seriously, but treat it more as a metaphor. It's like we are sensitive, we are receptive, we are able. If it's yellow and it grows by water, it's probably a diuretic. Like stay in touch, stay in touch with reality, stay in touch with the patterns, stay in touch with the fractal nature of reality. And there is a, and it will be, that's why I'm saying it's a way of knowing that, because again, it's not someone didn't have to figure out like, hey, this guy should treat his geese better. It all went together. It went hand in hand. Treating the geese better made the geese, or not force feeding them dry leaves and just letting them do it when they wanted to, made the foie gras taste better.
Yeah, I
It can
mean,
be as
and
simple as that, maybe.
and then of course, you're going to run an experiment later and be like, oh, guess what? There are also hormones that are only um, uh, around going around the geese bodies in the fall, right? And they help with
Yeah,
some
yeah,
metabolizing and stuff. And
right.
then you're going to be like, oh, now we understand. Yeah,
Exactly, which is like
that's
the scientist being like, "Oh, we figured out that geophagy makes sense." It's like, did you figure it out or did you just find your own way of understanding it? Exactly. And
yeah,
and maybe my point now is like, I don't know if we have time for all those scientists, and right now we're not trusting our scientists so much these days. So it behooves us to kind of invest in a more human scale, future proof your house, sensitive, relating to reality in a loving way of knowing. Yeah.
yeah. I really really like and appreciate this idea for sure. One thing I've always wondered about is how the hell the natives of South America found about ayahuasca, for example. It's like, how do you know that these
Yeah,
two different plants mixed together into a brew are going to give the shaman a tool which they liken to an X-ray of the soul? It's like, whoa,
totally.
that is out there.
So
And
yeah, so
yet they
here
did exactly that.
they
And
did.
it's like,
Yeah. I think that's a great one. I think another great one is acupuncture. If you believe that it's not you think that was trial and error? No way. There is no way that could be trial and error, right? It is ancient. There could not have been trial and error. So it's a great question. What was going on? How did they develop this system? Or how did they? And so that's where I would also bring us back to our co-creation of reality. It's not so distinct. Again, like we are a part of what we are trying to understand. And so there is a way in which, there is probably some legitimate, and I'm speaking out of place here, but communication going on between people in Latin America, the people who discovered ayahuasca and the plant itself, right? There's probably some real dialogue that was going on there, or some real collaboration, or I don't know what to call it. But yeah, that's where we are not so distinct from what we are trying to understand. We are part of a one phenomenon. We're part of life together, and we're part of
yeah.
the evolution of life together.
Yeah, and it reminds me
Yeah.
of Michael Pollan's book, Botany of Desire. Where he kind of takes on the perspective of the plant. So, for example, is it
Right.
really us who domesticated the potato, or is the potato managed to just like, okay, I'll change in this way if it means
Yeah.
that now I'm going to be super successful and the most grown plant on the planet or something like
Yeah.
that, and yeah, it definitely shows that us
Yeah.
and the potatoes are more like having a symbiosis more than anything.
Yeah. And like life, from the perspective of life, life is just evolving and co-evolving. So, we're definitely some key players here, obviously. But yeah, we're not, we don't have control of we don't have like total control of the steering wheel at all.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm so glad that we did get to go a little bit into that, because this is such an exciting topic, and I don't think we've exhausted it at all. Um, yeah, Stephanie, thank you so much. I'd like for you to share with listeners more about where you and your work could be found, basically.
Yeah, who am I? What do I do? No, thank you, Eyal. This really, I don't really get to talk about these things because I often, when I am invited to give talks, I usually keep it a little more, I don't know what to call it, more, I don't know,
Yeah,
safe or
yeah, yeah,
just
yeah. And actually,
not so far out. So,
it's
yeah.
it's so interesting because it's in this podcast, like that's exactly what I want people to come and
Oh, well,
experience
thank
something
you.
differently, right? And some people are like super comfortable with that. Some people are like, oh my god, I'm gonna
Oh.
lose my scientist persona. So I really appreciate you going with this.
Thank you. No, to me, it's like therapy because literally, where else am I going to do this? So, thank you, Dr. Ayal, for providing me a context in which I can just, playground where I can just kind of play and be a little free, a little more free. This is very fun. Um, yeah, so I am the executive producer at the Center for Humane Technology. If you saw The Social Dilemma, we are the organization that is featured at the heart of the film. You can find me on Twitter. You can find me on Twitter at Steph Lepp.
Amazing. That's great, Steph. Yeah, this has been amazing once again. And before I say goodbye, I want to make sure that everybody knows that if it's yellow and it grows by the water, it's probably a diuretic.
Probably, not certainly, but
Yes.
probably. Yes,
Thanks so
thank
much, Steph.
you.